May 8, 1985, Austin, Texas, Veterans Memorial Cemetery. The morning sun cut through the live oaks, dappling the rows of white headstones with shifting patterns of light and shadow. 64-year-old Carl Hoffman stepped out of his pickup truck, his movements careful, deliberate. His hair had gone completely white, but his back was still straight, his shoulders square. He wore American clothes now, jeans, boots, a Western shirt with pearl snaps. Only the faint accent in his voice betrayed that he had been born somewhere else. He carried something in his hands, a German iron cross. The metal was tarnished with age, the ribbon faded from black and white to shades of gray. Carl walked slowly between the headstones until he found the one he was looking for. Samuel Tucker, 1921 to 1984, United States Army, beloved husband, father, friend. Carl knelt in the grass, his knees protesting but obeying. He placed the iron cross next to the small American flag that marked the grave. His hands, weathered by decades of ranch work, trembled slightly. "I brought this for you, old friend," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You earned it more than I ever did." The cemetery was not empty. Behind Carl, perhaps 30 yards back, a group of elderly men watched in silence. American veterans, most of them. They had come to pay respects to Sam Tucker, one of their own. But they had not expected this. A German, kneeling at their friend's grave, placing an enemy medal beside the stars and stripes. One of the veterans, a man with a severe limp and a chest full of ribbons, stepped forward. His jaw was set, his eyes hard. But as he got closer and saw Carl's shoulders shaking with silent sobs, something in his expression softened. "You, Carl?" the veteran asked quietly. Carl looked up, his face wet with tears. "Yes, I am Carl Hoffman. Sam told us about you." The veteran extended his hand, "Told us the whole story, about that summer, about what you did, about what you became to each other." Carl took the offered hand, pulling himself to his feet. The other veterans were approaching now, forming a loose circle around the grave. Their faces were no longer hostile. Some were crying too. "Sam said you were the bravest German he ever met," the veteran continued. "Said you taught him that enemies don't have to stay enemies. That hate is a choice, and so is love." Carl could not speak. His throat was too tight, too full of 40 years of memory and grief and gratitude. Another veteran spoke up, his voice thick with emotion. "Welcome home, Carl. Welcome home." The camera pulls back slowly, showing the circle of old soldiers standing around one grave, united by the memory of a man who had chosen love over hate, forgiveness over revenge, brotherhood over enmity. The morning sun climbs higher, warming the Texas earth, and somewhere in the distance, a mockingbird begins to sing. Narrator. This is the story of how that moment came to be. How a young Nazi soldier raised on propaganda and hatred came to Texas as a prisoner of war in 1944 and discovered something that would shatter everything he thought he knew about America, about himself, about what it means to be human. It is a story about bacon, about a cowboy with a limp and a stubborn heart, about a horse named Liberty and a choice that changed two lives forever. But most of all, it is a story about how sometimes the greatest victories are not won on battlefields with guns and bombs, but in quiet moments with kindness and courage, and the radical act of seeing your enemy as a brother. If you or someone you love served during the Second World War, you will recognize these moments, the texture of them, the weight. And if you have ever wondered whether forgiveness can truly change a heart hardened by years of hatred, you are about to find out. But to understand how Carl Hoffman ended up kneeling at an American veteran's grave with tears streaming down his face, we must go back 41 years. To a cold morning in North Africa where a 23-year-old German soldier was about to become prisoner number 31,174 and have his entire world turned upside down. Tunisia, March 1943. The desert sun was merciless, turning the sand to hammered brass under a sky bleached white with heat. Carl Hoffman crouched behind a destroyed half-track, his uniform stiff with dried sweat and dust, his mouth tasting of copper and fear. Around him, what remained of his unit from the Africa Corps was scattered among the rocks in wrecked vehicles. They had been surrounded for 3 days. No water, no ammunition, no hope. The British and Americans had them boxed in completely. It was only a matter of time. Carl was 23 years old. He had joined the Wehrmacht not out of devotion to the Nazi Party, but because that was what young men did in 1941 Germany. You joined the army you served, you did your duty. His father, a Lutheran pastor in a small Bavarian village, had tried to discourage him. "This war is built on lies," his father had said quietly late one night when no one else could hear. "It will end in ashes and shame." But Carl had gone anyway. What choice did he have? Now, 3 years later, squinting through the desert heat, shimmer at the American tanks rolling slowly toward their position, Carl wondered if his father had been right about everything. The white flag went up at noon, torn from someone's undershirt tied to a rifle barrel waving weakly in the hot breeze. Carl felt a strange mixture of relief and terror. He would live, but as a prisoner, and he had been taught endlessly what Americans did to their prisoners. The propaganda had been very clear. Americans were brutal, decadent. They would torture German soldiers, work them to death, show no mercy. So when the first American soldier approached young and sunburned with his rifle at the ready, Carl expected violence. Instead, the American said something in English that Carl did not fully understand, then pulled a canteen from his belt and offered it. Water. Carl stared at the canteen, certain it was a trick, but his thirst was overwhelming. He took it with shaking hands and drank. The water was warm, tasted of metal and chemicals, and it was the most beautiful thing he had ever experienced. The American soldier smiled, not a cruel smile, just tired, human. Then he pulled something else from his pack, a chocolate bar. He broke it in half and handed a piece to Carl. Real chocolate, not the ersatz garbage German soldiers had been eating for 2 years. Real sweet American chocolate. Carl ate it slowly and something in his chest began to crack. This was the enemy, this sunburned kid with kind eyes who shared his water and his chocolate. It made no sense. Nothing made sense anymore. The journey to America. The transport from North Africa to America took 5 weeks, first by truck to the coast, then by prisoner ship across the Mediterranean to Gibraltar, then across the Atlantic to Norfolk, Virginia. Carl spent most of the voyage trying to understand what was happening to him. The ship was crowded, uncomfortable, but not brutal. The guards were professional, distant but not cruel. And the food, God in heaven, the food. Real bread, not sawdust mixed with potato flour, but actual wheat bread with a soft center and a golden crust. Soup with meat in it. Vegetables that were not rotten. Coffee. Real coffee, not the burnt acorn slop they had been drinking in the Africa Corps. Carl and his fellow prisoners ate in stunned silence, unable to reconcile what they were experiencing with what they had been taught. "They are fattening us up," one of the older prisoners muttered, "getting us strong before they work us to death in their factories." But Carl was not so sure. He had seen the American soldiers, had watched them. They did not move like men preparing to commit atrocities. They moved like men who were tired of war and just wanted to go home. On the 5th night of the Atlantic crossing, Carl sat on the deck under a sky full of stars wrapped in a wool blanket that the guards had distributed. A wool blanket for prisoners. He thought about his mother back in Bavaria, wondered if she was warm, if she had enough to eat. He thought about his younger sister Greta, only 19, trying to survive in a Germany that was slowly collapsing under the weight of its own lies. And he thought about his father, who had died in 1941 of a heart attack. Stress, the doctors had said. But Carl suspected it was something else. Grief. The grief of watching his country embrace evil while he stood helpless to stop it. Carl pulled out a small notebook, contraband he had managed to keep hidden through the capture and transport. He began to write, his handwriting cramped and difficult in the darkness. "Mutti, I am going to America. They say it is the land of gangsters and Jews, that it is weak and corrupt. I am afraid. But also the Americans who captured us were not like we were told. They shared their water with us. They gave us blankets. I do not understand yet, but I think maybe we have been lied to about more than I realized." He did not mail the letter, could not mail it, but he kept it folded in the notebook, the record of the moment when doubt first took root. Camp Hearn, Texas, May 1944. The train from Virginia to Texas took 3 days. Carl pressed his face to the window, watching America scroll past. Towns and farms and forests. Everything so green, so abundant, so impossibly large. Germany was a small, cramped country. Every inch of land accounted for, regulated, controlled. But America seemed to go on forever. When they finally arrived at Camp Hearn in Robertson County, Texas, Carl stepped off the train into heat that hit him like a physical blow. The sky was enormous, stretching from horizon to horizon without a single cloud. The air smelled of dust and grass and something sweet he could not identify. 4,800 German prisoners were housed at Camp Hearn. Most of them, like Carl, had been captured in North Africa. They were lined up for inspection, standing in neat rows under the brutal Texas sun, while American officers walked among them. Carl expected harsh treatment, shouting, maybe violence. Instead, the camp commander, a Colonel Richardson with gray hair and weary eyes, spoke to them in accented but understandable German. Gentlemen, you are prisoners of war, but you will be treated according to the Geneva Convention. You will receive adequate food, medical care, and shelter. You will be required to work, but the work will be fair and you will be compensated. We are not barbarians. We do not make war on helpless men. Behave yourselves, follow the rules, and your time here will pass without incident. The prisoners exchanged confused glances. This was the brutal American treatment they had been warned about. The medical examination was next. Thorough but professional. A doctor checked each prisoner, treating minor wounds, making notes about more serious conditions. Carl had an infected cut on his arm from the battle. The doctor cleaned it, applied sulfa powder, bandaged it carefully. This should heal fine, the doctor said in English. Then, seeing Carl's confusion, he repeated it slowly. Heal, get better, understand? Carl nodded. Verstehen, I understand, thank you. You speak English? Little bit. I study in school. The doctor smiled. Well, practice while you are here. Never know when it might come in handy. They were issued clean uniforms, plain gray cotton, but clean new without holes or lice. They were given toiletries. Soap, actual soap, not the caustic lye bars German soldiers used. Toothbrushes, razors, towels. Then they were shown to their barracks, long wooden buildings with rows of cots. Each cot had a thin mattress, a pillow, 2 wool blankets. It was Spartan, certainly, but it was clean, and it was more than Carl had slept on in 2 years of military service. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for the mess hall. The first meal, dinner, was served at 1800 hours. The prisoners filed into the mess hall, a large building with long tables and benches. The smell hit Carl first. Cooking meat. Real meat, not the stringy horse meat or mystery cans that German soldiers subsisted on. His stomach cramped with sudden, overwhelming hunger. They lined up with metal trays. Kitchen workers, other prisoners who had been there longer, served the food. Carl watched his tray fill and could not believe his eyes. Bacon. Real bacon, thick slices, crispy at the edges, glistening with fat. Scrambled eggs. Generous portions, yellow and fluffy, still steaming. White bread. 2 slices, soft and fresh with butter. Actual butter, not the rancid margarine or lard substitute. Fried potatoes, golden and crispy. Coffee. Real coffee, black and strong and smelling like heaven itself. Carl carried his tray to a table, sat down, and stared at the food. Around him, other prisoners were having similar reactions. Some were crying. One man was actually praying, hands clasped over his tray, lips moving in silent thanksgiving. Carl picked up the bacon with his fingers, too overwhelmed to bother with the fork. He bit into it. The flavor exploded in his mouth. Salt and smoke and fat and something indefinably wonderful. He closed his eyes, and for a moment he was not a prisoner in a foreign land. He was just a human being eating good food. Mein Gott, whispered the man next to him. Wolfgang Schneider, a fellow corporal from Hamburg. This is what they eat every day. I do not know, Carl replied, his mouth full, but this is better than what German soldiers get. Better than what I ate before the war even. They ate in silence, savoring every bite. The eggs were perfect. The potatoes were seasoned with something delicious. The bread was so soft it almost melted on the tongue. And the coffee, God, the coffee was strong and bitter and real. When Carl finished, he sat back, his stomach full, for the first time in longer than he could remember. He felt almost dizzy. Around him, the mess hall was quiet except for the sounds of eating and occasional soft exclamations of disbelief. That night in his bunk, Carl pulled out his contraband notebook again. He wrote by the light of the bare bulb that hung from the ceiling of the barracks. Day 1 in Texas, they fed us bacon. Real bacon. I have not seen such food since before the war. What kind of country feeds its enemies better than its own soldiers eat? I do not understand this place. But I think perhaps everything we were taught was wrong. He put the notebook under his thin pillow and lay back staring at the ceiling. Outside, the Texas night was full of sounds he did not recognize. Insects, strange birds, the wind moving through grass that went on for miles and miles. Sleep did not come easily. His mind was too full of contradictions, of propaganda that said one thing and reality that showed another, of American soldiers who shared chocolate, and American doctors who healed wounds, and American cooks who served bacon and eggs to enemy prisoners. What kind of country was this? What kind of people Carl did not know? But he was beginning to suspect that finding out might change him in ways he could not yet imagine. Sam Tucker, among the guards at Camp Hearn, was a young man who would change Carl Hoffman's life forever. His name was Samuel Tucker. Sam. He was 23 years old, exactly the same age as Carl, though the two men did not look alike in any other way. Sam was tall and lean-built, like a man who had spent his whole life working with his hands. His skin was deeply tanned from the Texas sun, his hair dark brown, his eyes an unusual shade of gray-green. He wore a cowboy hat whenever regulations allowed it, pushed back on his head in a way that suggested he had been wearing hats like that since childhood. He walked with a slight limp, the left leg. Not severe, but noticeable if you paid attention. Carl first saw Sam Tucker 3 days after arriving at Camp Hearn. Work details were being assigned, and prisoners were being divided up among various local farms and ranches that needed labor. The war had taken so many American men overseas that the farms were desperate for workers, and the German prisoners, disciplined and hardworking, were a solution. Tucker Ranch, an officer called out consulting his clipboard, needs 6 men for cattle, work, and general labor. Hoffman, Schneider, Bauer, Koch, Muller, Weber, front and center. Carl and 5 others stepped forward. A man in civilian clothes, older maybe 50, with a weathered face and kind eyes, looked them over. Jack Tucker, Carl would learn later. The ranch owner. "They look strong enough," Jack said to the young soldier standing beside him. "What do you think, Sam?" Sam Tucker looked at the 6 German prisoners with an expression Carl could not quite read. Not hatred exactly, but not friendliness either. Something harder, something that had sharp edges. "They'll do," Sam said shortly, "long as they work and don't cause trouble." His voice was flat, emotionless, the voice of a man who had learned to hide what he was feeling. "Good?" Jack nodded. He turned to the prisoners and spoke in heavily accented but understandable German. "I am Jack Tucker. This is my son Sam. You will work on my ranch 6 days a week. We will treat you fairly. We expect hard work in return. Understand?" Carl and the others nodded. "My son will be your supervisor. You follow his orders. No questions. Verstehen." "Ja, Herr Tucker, we understand." They were loaded onto a truck, Sam driving, Jack beside him in the passenger seat. Carl sat in the back with the other prisoners watching the Texas landscape roll past. Endless grass, scattered trees, cattle grazing in the distance. The sky so big it seemed to press down on the earth. After 20 minutes, they turned out to a dirt road marked by a wooden sign that read Tucker Ranch. The road wound through pastures and over a small creek before arriving at a collection of buildings. A barn large and well-maintained, a corral with several horses, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, and in the distance, a 2-story house with a wide porch and rocking chairs. Sam parked the truck and turned to face the prisoners. When he spoke, his voice was cold, controlled. "Listen carefully. I will say this once. You are prisoners. You are enemies. My brother died fighting Germans at Anzio. My leg got torn up at Normandy fighting Germans. I do not like you. I do not trust you. But my father needs workers, and you are what we have." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You will work hard. You will follow orders. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not approach my mother or my sister unless absolutely necessary. You will not make trouble. If you do any of these things, you will be back in camp so fast your head will spin. Are we clear?" "Jawohl," Carl said quietly. "Yes, sir." "I don't speak German," Sam snapped. "English only on this ranch. You got that?" "Yeah," Carl said, stumbling over the English. "Yes, sir, we understand." Sam stared at him for a long moment, those gray-green eyes bold and measuring. Then he turned away. "Good. Let's get to work." The first week, the work was hard but not cruel. Fence repair, feeding cattle, mucking out stalls, basic ranch maintenance. Carl had never done this kind of labor before. He had been a student studying mathematics at university before the war. His hands were soft, his back unaccustomed to the constant bending and lifting. By the end of the first day, his palms were blistered. By the end of the first week, the blisters had burst and reformed as calluses. His shoulders ached, his back screamed. But there was something satisfying about the work, something honest. You could see what you had accomplished. A fence that was broken was now fixed. A dirty stall was now clean. A field that needed clearing was now clear. It was different from the war where nothing was ever really accomplished, where you just destroyed things and watched them get destroyed in return. The Tucker family Carl quickly learned was generous in ways that baffled him. Martha Tucker, Sam's mother, a woman of about 50, with graying hair and warm eyes, insisted on feeding the prisoners the same food the ranch hands ate. Breakfast was extraordinary. Biscuits and gravy, sausage, fried potatoes, fresh eggs, coffee. Every single morning this abundance. Carl could not comprehend it. "Ma'am," he said to Martha on the third day, his English halting but improving, "this is very much food. Too much." Martha smiled at him, a smile that reminded him painfully of his own mother. "Well, you are working hard, aren't you? Can't work on an empty stomach." "But we are prisoners. We are enemies." Martha's smile faded slightly, became something more serious. "You are people, and people need to eat. That is all there is to it." Later, Carl heard Wolfgang whisper in German, "They treat their enemies like this. What kind of country feeds and cares for people who fought against them?" Carl had no answer. He was beginning to wonder the same thing. Sam Tucker remained distant. He gave orders, checked their work, corrected mistakes, but never with cruelty. Just a cold professional detachment. He never ate with them, never made conversation, never smiled. But Carl noticed things. He noticed that Sam's limp was worse in the mornings, as if the night had stiffened the injured leg. He noticed that Sam sometimes stopped in the middle of work and stared at nothing, his jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists. He noticed that Sam kept a photograph in his shirt pocket, and sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, he would take it out and look at it with an expression of such raw grief that Carl had to look away. Carl understood. He understood what it meant to lose someone. He understood what it meant to carry anger that had nowhere to go. On the seventh day, late in the afternoon, Carl was working alone on a section of fence at the far edge of the north pasture. The sun was low, painting everything orange and gold. His shirt was soaked with sweat, his hands aching, but the work was almost done. He did not hear Sam approach until the man spoke. "You speak English pretty well." Carl turned surprised. Sam was standing a few yards away, his expression neutral, but no longer quite so cold. "I study in school," Carl replied carefully. "Before war. I want to be teacher. Mathematics." "Mathematics?" Sam repeated. "That's a long way from fixing fences in Texas." "Yes, war takes many things, takes futures, takes choices, makes you something you did not plan to be." Sam was quiet for a moment. Then, "Where are you from in Germany?" "Bavaria, small village, very beautiful, mountains, forests. My father was Lutheran pastor there." "Was he die in 1941? Heart attack." Carl paused. "I think maybe he died from sadness, from watching country become something evil." Sam's expression changed just slightly, something like surprise or recognition. "Your father spoke against the Nazis. He tried, quietly. He preached forgiveness, love, kindness. They make him retire. Say he is not loyal to Reich." Carl set down his hammer, met Sam's eyes directly. "He was braver than me. He spoke truth. I just put on uniform and went to war. I was coward. You are here now, in Texas. Prisoner. That doesn't seem like a coward's fate. Maybe, or maybe fate brings me here to learn something I could not learn in Germany." Sam studied him for a long moment. The sun was setting behind them, turning the sky into layers of orange and pink and deep purple. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. A hawk circled overhead, wings spread wide. "Why?" Sam asked finally. "Why did you join if you did not believe in it?" Carl considered the question. How to explain, how to make this American cowboy understand what it had been like in Germany, the pressure, the propaganda, the sense that you had no choice. In Germany, he said slowly, was like drowning. Very slow. Each day water gets little higher. At first you think is not so bad. You can still breathe, but then one day you realize water is at chin, and you cannot remember when it got so high. Sam nodded slowly. And you could not swim. Some people swim, some people speak out. My father tried on, but speaking out could cost everything, your job, your family, your life. Most of us, we just keep quiet. We pretend water is not rising. We tell ourselves we have no choice. Carl's voice dropped. But that is lie. There is always choice. Even if choice is hard. Yeah, Sam said quietly. There is always a choice. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Sam turned to go. But he paused, looked back. That was good work on the fence. It will hold. It was the first compliment that Sam had given any of the prisoners. Small, grudging, but real. Thank you, Carl said. Sam nodded once and walked away, his limp barely visible in the fading light. Carl watched him go, something shifting in his chest. Sam Tucker hated Germans, had every reason to hate them. But he had stopped to talk, had asked questions, had listened. It was not friendship, not yet, but it was something. A crack in the wall, a possibility. Carl picked up his hammer and finished the last section of fence as the stars began to appear in the enormous Texas sky. He did not know it yet, but this moment, this conversation, was the beginning. The first step on a journey that would transform them both. Because in 3 weeks, Carl Hoffman would do something that no amount of Nazi propaganda could explain. He would risk his life to save something innocent. And in doing so, he would crack open Sam Tucker's carefully guarded heart and show him that the enemy he hated was also impossibly beautifully, undeniably human. The enemy was a brother waiting to be found. Narrator. By late June of 1944, a rhythm had settled over the Tucker Ranch. Carl Hoffman and his 5 fellow prisoners arrived each morning at dawn in the back of an army truck, worked until the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, and returned to Camp Hearn as the sky turned the color of rust and blood and gold. They were good workers. The Germans brought a precision to their labor that impressed even the skeptical ranch hands. When Carl repaired a fence, every post was plumb, every wire taut, every nail driven true. When Wolfgang cleaned a stall, it was immaculate. When they said a job was finished, it was finished properly. Jack Tucker noticed. They do not do things halfway, he told his wife Martha one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. When a German says he fixed something, it stays fixed. Martha smiled. Your father used to say that character shows in the small things. How a man treats a horse, how he mends a fence. These boys have character. Do not let Sam hear you call them boys. He still sees them as the enemy. Sam sees what his grief allows him to see, but grief is a strange thing, Jack. Sometimes it blinds you. Sometimes it opens your eyes. Jack reached over and took his wife's hand. They had been married 26 years. She understood their son better than he did. Sam Tucker remained distant from the prisoners, professional but cold. He gave orders in that flat, emotionless voice. He checked their work with the thoroughness of a man who expected failure and was determined to find it. But he never found it. The Germans worked hard, followed instructions, caused no trouble. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the ice began to thaw. It started with small things, Sam teaching Carl the proper way to throw a lasso, demonstrating the wrist motion 3 times until Carl got it right, then almost smiling when the loop settled perfectly over the fence post. Sam showing Wolfgang how to read the sky for weather, pointing out the mare's tail clouds that meant rain was coming. Sam bringing his guitar to the work site during lunch break and strumming a few chords, not saying anything when Carl began to hum along. The other ranch hands, Mexicans who had worked the Tucker place for years, ate lunch with the prisoners, sharing cigarettes and broken conversation in a mixture of Spanish, English, and German that should not have worked, but somehow did. They laughed together, told jokes that did not quite translate but were funny anyway, passed around photographs of families back home. But Sam stayed separate, present but apart, supervising but not participating, until the day Liberty got loose. June 23, 1944. The morning started like any other. Clear sky, brutal heat building even at 7 in the morning, the kind of dry Texas heat that sucked the moisture from your lungs and turned your shirt to a sodden rag within an hour. Carl was working on the north pasture fence, replacing rotted posts, when he noticed the clouds building in the west. Not the mare's tail wisps that meant gentle rain. These were tall, dark, angry-looking towers of cumulus that seemed to boil up out of the earth itself. "Storm coming," one of the Mexican ranch hands called out, pointing. "Big one, we better get to the barn." They gathered their tools and started walking back, but the storm moved faster than anyone expected. In Texas, weather does not creep up gradually. It ambushes you. One moment the sky is partly cloudy, the next moment it is bruised purple, black, and the wind is screaming, and the first fat drops are hitting your face like thrown gravel. "Run!" Jack Tucker shouted from the barn's entrance. "Everyone inside now!" They ran. The rain hit before they made it halfway, a solid wall of water that turned the world into a gray blur. Lightning cracked so close that Carl felt it in his teeth, in his bones. Thunder followed instantly, a physical blow of sound that made his ears ring. They stumbled into the barn, soaking wet, breathing hard. The rain hammered the tin roof like machine gun fire. Another lightning strike close enough to light up the interior of the barn like a camera flash. And in that instant of illumination, Carl saw Jack Tucker's face go white. "Liberty," Jack breathed. "Sweet Jesus, Liberty is still in the corral." Through the barn door, barely visible through the sheets of rain, they could see the mare. Jack's prized quarter horse, 8 years old, a beautiful animal with a copper coat and intelligent eyes. She was worth more money than most men earned in 2 years. More importantly, she was Jack's breeding mare, the foundation of his future herd. And she was terrified. The lightning and thunder had driven her into a panic. She reared and bucked, fighting against invisible demons, her eyes rolling white. Another lightning bolt struck somewhere close by, and Liberty went completely wild. She charged the corral fence, 1,200 pounds of muscle and fear hitting the wooden rails with the force of a battering ram. The fence splintered. Boards cracked and flew. Liberty burst through and bolted into the open pasture, running blind. Running from the storm, running from her terror. Running straight toward the ravine. No, Jack was already moving, but he was 54 years old, and the horse was young and panicked. Sam started after her, but his damaged leg could not keep pace. The Mexican ranch hands were too far from their horses to give chase, and Liberty was heading for the 15-foot drop that would break her legs, her neck, her future. Would end her, Carl did not think. There was no time to think. He saw the ravine, saw the horse running toward it, saw what would happen, and his body moved before his mind could object. He ran. Carl had been a middle-distance runner at university. His lean frame ate up the ground, his legs pumping, his lungs burning. The rain made the grass slick, but he stayed upright, angling to intercept Liberty's path. The ravine was 100 yards away. 75. 50. Liberty's hoofbeats thundered against the earth. She was not thinking anymore, just fleeing in pure animal terror. Carl could see the foam at her mouth. The whites of her eyes could hear her labored breathing. He had one chance. The horse's halter had a lead rope trailing behind her like a tail. Carl sprinted harder, his lungs screaming for air, his legs threatening to give out. 25 yards from the ravine edge, he dove. His fingers closed around the wet rope. Liberty's momentum yanked him off his feet. He hit the ground hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. The world went white with pain. But he held on. The rope burned through his hands like a blade of fire. The wet hemp cut into his palms, peeling away skin, exposing raw flesh. Carl wrapped the rope around his forearms, ignoring the searing agony, trying to find purchase in the mud. Liberty dragged him. 10 feet, 15, 20. His shoulders felt like they were being torn from their sockets. His hands were slick with blood and rain, but still he held on. Through the pain and rain and terror, Carl saw it. A fence post, 3 feet to his left. With the last of his strength, he lunged sideways. The rope wrapped once around the post. Twice. The line went taut. Liberty jerked to a stop, fighting against the restraint, but the physics were against her now. The post held, 30 feet from the ravine edge. Carl lay in the mud, his hands on fire, his lungs heaving, looking at his palms. They were a mess of torn skin and exposed flesh. Blood mixed with rainwater, running pink down his forearms. He could not make fists, could not close his fingers. But he was still holding the rope. Liberty was still alive. Footsteps splashing through mud. Voices shouting. Then Sam was there, taking the rope from Carl's ruined hands with surprising gentleness. Jack arrived next, approaching his horse, slowly speaking in low, soothing tones. The mare's panic was fading. She let Jack take her halter, let herself be led away from the ravine. Carl sat in the mud, cradling his hands, and realized he was shaking. Not from cold, from the aftershock of what had almost happened. Sam knelt beside him. Let me see. Carl held out his hands. Even in the rain, the damage was obvious. The rope had cut deep furrows across both palms. Second-degree burns at minimum. Third-degree oil in places where the rope had burned through to the deeper layers of skin. Blood welled up and was immediately washed away by the rain. Jesus Christ, Sam breathed. Why? Why would you do that? You could have been killed. She could have dragged you right over that edge with her. Carl looked up at Sam, rain streaming down his face, and said simply, "The horse did nothing wrong. It was not her fault, the storm. Why should she die?" "But you are a prisoner. You are—" Sam stopped himself. "I am enemy." Carl's voice was soft. "Yes, but I am also human, and horse is innocent, more innocent than any of us." Jack Tucker returned, his face gray with shock and something else, something like wonder. He knelt beside Carl, examined the torn hands, and his voice when he spoke was rough with emotion. "Son, do you know what that horse is worth? Do you understand? She is my future, my breeding program, everything. I know she is important to you. That is why I could not let her die. But you could have just let her go. You could have let her get hurt, to spite us, to hurt us." Carl looked confused. "Why would I do that? You give me food. You treat me with respect. You teach me. Why would I want to hurt you?" Jack Tucker sat back on his heels, staring at this young German prisoner with the ruined hands and the incomprehensible kindness, and something broke open in his chest. "Sam," Jack said quietly, "get Doc Martin. Get him now." The doctor, Doc Martin, arrived an hour later, a wizened man of 68 who had been treating people and animals in Robertson County since before some of the prisoners were born. He examined Carl's hands with a grim expression, making small clicking sounds with his tongue against his teeth. "Second-degree burns across both palms. Third degree here between the thumb and forefinger on the left hand. You are lucky you did not sever the tendons entirely. Lucky you did not lose fingers." He began cleaning the wounds with methodical care. Carl's face was white with pain, but he did not cry out. "You play piano, son." "No, sir, mathematics. I study mathematics before war. I want to be teacher." "Well, you will teach again. These will heal. Going to hurt like the devil for a few weeks, though." The doctor began wrapping Carl's hands in white gauze, layer after layer, until they looked like clumsy white mittens. "You need these changed twice daily. Infection is the real danger now." Sam watched the process in silence, his jaw working, as if he were chewing on words he could not quite spit out. After the doctor left, Jack pulled Sam aside. They stood in the barn doorway, watching the storm fade into the east, leaving behind clean, washed air and puddles that reflected the emerging sun. Carl sat on a bench nearby, his bandaged hands resting in his lap, and he did not pretend that he could not hear them. "That boy has character, Sam. He is a German soldier, Dad. He is a former German soldier who just risked his life to save our horse. Our future." Jack's voice was firm. "That was not enemy behavior, son. That was nobility. Pure and simple. Bobby would have done the same thing. Yes, he would have." Jack put his hand on Sam's shoulder, "Which is exactly why your mama wants Carl at Sunday dinner." Sam turned to stare at his father. "What? You heard me? Martha says anyone who risks his life to save an innocent creature deserves a proper thank you. And in this house, a proper thank you means Sunday dinner. She is making fried chicken." Sam was quiet for a long moment, his face working through emotions too complex to name. Finally, he said, "She is really going to invite a German prisoner to eat at our table, at Bobby's table. She already decided. You know how your mama is when she gets an idea in her head." Sam looked over at Carl, who was struggling one-handed to button his shirt with his bandaged hands, his face tight with frustration. Something in Sam's expression softened just a fraction. "Yeah," Sam said quietly, "I know how she is." The invitation. Later that evening, as the prisoners prepared to return to camp, Sam approached Carl. The young German was still fumbling with his shirt buttons, his bandaged hands making the simple task nearly impossible. "Here." Sam stepped forward and buttoned the shirt with quick, efficient movements. The gesture was intimate, almost brotherly, and both men felt the strangeness of it. Thank you, Carl said quietly. Sam stepped back, looked away, looked back. Hoffman, tomorrow is Sunday. Yes, sir. We do not work Sundays on this ranch. It is the Lord's day. We rest, we go to church, we spend time with family. I understand, sir. My mama, Sam paused as if the words were difficult to form. My mama wants you to come to dinner tomorrow. At the house with the family. Carl's eyes widened. Me to your house. You saved Liberty. Mama says that earns a proper thank you. The words came out rushed like Sam needed to say them before he changed his mind. She is making fried chicken. The way he said it, fried chicken, was not just food. It was an offering, a sacrament, something sacred. Carl shook his head slowly. Mr. Tucker, I do not understand. I am prisoner. My country killed your brother. How can your mother want me in her house? Sam's face worked through several emotions before settling on something like resignation mixed with reluctant admiration. I do not understand it either, if I am being honest. Mama has her own way of seeing the world. She says holding on to hate just poisons your own heart. Says you did a good thing today, and good things deserve recognition. Even from enemies. Especially from enemies, Carl said softly. Sam looked at him sharply. Where did you hear that? My father. He was Lutheran pastor. He used to say when you do good to your enemy, you shame their hatred. You show them a different way. Carl's voice dropped. I did not believe him. Until Texas. The two men stood in silence as cicadas began their evening chorus and the last light faded from the western sky. So will you come? Sam asked. Tomorrow, 1 o'clock. Carl looked down at his bandaged hands. I will need help to eat. We will help you. That is what... Sam paused, choosing his words carefully. That is what neighbors do. Neighbors, not prisoners and guards, neighbors. Then yes, Carl said, meeting Sam's eyes. I will come and I will say thank you to your mother. For the food, yes, but also for seeing me, not just the uniform. Mihamam. Sam nodded once curtly, then turned to go. But at the barn door he stopped. Carl. It was the first time he had used Carl's first name. Yes. You could have died today. You know that, right? Liberty could have dragged you straight over that ravine. Could have been your neck broken instead of just your hands torn up. Yes, I know this. Then why? Really? Tell me the truth. Carl thought for a long moment, trying to find words for something he barely understood himself. How to explain that in saving the horse, he was somehow trying to save a piece of himself, that every act of kindness was a small rebellion against the hate he had been taught. Finally, he said, because she was innocent, and I have seen too many innocent things die in this war. I am tired of death, Sam, so tired. When I saw Liberty running toward the ravine, I thought here is something I can save. Here is one innocent life I can protect. Maybe this makes up for something. Makes up for small piece of the death I helped cause. Sam stared at him for a long moment. The barn was growing dark, filled with shadows and the smell of hay and horses. Outside, the evening star was appearing in the eastern sky. Sunday, 1 o'clock. Do not be late, Sam said. Mama hates it when the chicken gets cold. Sunday morning, Sunday, June 25th, 1944, dawn clear and hot. At Camp Hearn, Carl dressed in his cleanest uniform, though clean was a relative term after weeks of ranch work. He tried to button the shirt himself, fumbled with his bandaged hands for 10 minutes, and finally accepted help from Wolfgang, who regarded the whole situation with bemused skepticism. You are really going to eat at their house, the Americans, 'cause you saved a horse? Wolfgang asked in German. Yes. Why, what does it mean? I do not know yet, but I need to understand something. How they can be behind after everything. After their son died fighting us. Wolfgang shook his head. Be careful, Carl. Do not fall in love with your captors. There is a word for that. This is different. They are not just being kind because I am helpless. They are being kind because they choose to be. That choice means something. The truck ride from camp to the ranch felt longer than usual. Carl's stomach churned not from hunger, but from nerves. What did one say at an enemy's dinner table? How did one behave when the truck pulled up to the Tucker house? Martha Tucker was waiting on the porch. She wore her Sunday dress simple but clean, and pressed her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. When she smiled at Carl, something in his chest cracked. She looked like his mother, the same warmth in her eyes, the same gentle strength. Come in," Martha called in, her voice warm and welcoming. "Don't be shy now. Lord knows you earned your place at this table." Carl climbed down from the truck, his movements careful, and walked slowly up the porch steps. Martha took one look at his bandaged hands and made a soft sound of sympathy. "Oh, honey, those look painful. Come inside. We will take care of you." The living room was simple but comfortable, worn furniture that had seen decades of use, photographs on the walls, a wedding portrait of Martha and Jack from a quarter century earlier, family pictures, children at various ages, and there on the mantel in a place of honor, a formal military portrait. Second Lieutenant Robert Tucker, United States Army. 19 years old, forever caught in silver gelatin in memory. He wore his uniform with obvious pride, the hint of a smile playing at his lips, his eyes bright with youth and confidence, and the certainty that he would come home. Carl stopped in front of the photograph. He could not help himself. Bobby Tucker had been handsome with Sam's strong jaw and Martha's kind eyes. He looked like someone Carl might have been friends with in another life, in a world without war. "That is our Bobby." Carl turned. Emma Tucker stood beside him, 19 years old, Sam's younger sister. She had been crying. Her eyes were red swollen. "I am so sorry," Carl said, the English words inadequate but sincere. "So truly deeply sorry, Miss Tucker." "Were you at Anzio?" Her voice was quiet, dangerous. "No, miss. North Africa. But it does not matter where I was. We are all guilty, all of us Germans. We started this war. Your brother died because of what my country did. I cannot say sorry enough times. There are not enough words in any language." Emma's face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "He wanted to be a teacher, history teacher. He used to say people who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And now he is gone, and I just—" Her voice broke. "I just want him back." Carl's own eyes burned. "My sister Greta is your age, 19. She lost her sweetheart to this war also. She writes me the same thing. I just want him back. But there are no words that help, in German or English. No words can bring back what war takes." Martha appeared, taking Emma gently by the shoulders. "Come on, honey. Carl is our guest today. Let us show him what Texas hospitality looks like." She guided them toward the dining room where Jack and Sam were setting the table. The sight that greeted Carl stopped him in his tracks. The table, the Sunday dinner table at the Tucker Ranch, was a work of art and abundance. Golden brown fried chicken piled high on a platter, each piece perfectly crispy, glistening with seasoning. Mashed potatoes whipped to clouds, a well of melted butter pooling in the center. Green beans swimming in bacon grease, fragrant with onion and black pepper. Biscuits tall and fluffy and steaming, arranged in a basket lined with a red check cloth. A pitcher of sweet tea sweating condensation. And in the center, like a crown jewel, a peach cobbler that smelled of cinnamon and summer and home. Carl stood in the doorway, overwhelmed. This was not just a meal. This was celebration. This was love made visible. This was everything he had not known he was missing. "Is this Sunday dinner?" he asked, his voice small. Martha laughed, a warm sound that filled the room. "Well, it is a special Sunday with a guest. But yes, this is how we eat when we are giving thanks. In Germany, before the war, we had good food sometimes. But not like this, never like this." Jack pulled out a chair. "Sit down, son. Next to Sam. Cannot eat standing up, though. Lord knows with those hands eating, sitting down will be challenge enough." They settled around the table. Jack at the head, Martha at the foot, Sam and Carl on one side, Emma on the other. Carl's bandaged hands rested uselessly in his lap. He felt suddenly acutely aware of his helplessness, of his dependence on these people who should be his enemies. "Let us say grace," Jack announced. Carl bowed his head, familiar with the ritual from his Lutheran upbringing. He expected something standard, something brief. What came next shocked him to his core. "Lord," Jack began, his voice deep and sincere, "we thank you for this food, for the hands that prepared it, for the land that provided it. We thank you for family, for health, for the blessing of another day." Standard enough. Carl had heard similar prayers hundreds of times. But then Jack continued, and Carl's head snapped up involuntarily. "And we thank you for bringing Carl safely to our table today. We pray for his family in Germany, that they are safe and fed and protected from harm. We pray for his mother and his sister that they have enough to eat, that they are warm, that they know their son and brother is being treated with dignity. Carl's eyes began to burn. They were praying for Germans, for his family. Jack's voice thickened with emotion. We thank you for Bobby Lord, for the 19 years we had with him, for his laughter and his kindness and his dreams. And we pray for all the boys who will not come home. American boys, yes, but also German boys, Italian boys, Japanese boys. All of them somebody's son. All of them somebody's brother. All of them precious in your sight. Martha was crying silently. Emma, too. Sam's jaw was clenched so tight the muscles stood out like cords. Help us remember, Lord, that you told us to love our enemies, not just tolerate them, not just feed them, but actually truly love them. That is hard, Lord. That is so damned hard. Jack's voice cracked. But Carl here, he showed us something when he saved liberty. He showed us that underneath the uniforms, underneath the flags and the propaganda, we are all just scared children trying to survive. Help us see that. Help us choose love over hate, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Amen. Amen, the family echoed. Amen, Carl whispered through tears that he could not control. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was Carl's quiet crying, great gasping sobs that shook his shoulders. All the grief he had carried, all the guilt and confusion and longing for home poured out of him. Martha reached across the table. Her hand, worn by years of work, but infinitely gentle, rested on top of his bandaged one. It is all right, son. You let it out. Sometimes that is the only thing that helps. Slowly, Carl composed himself. He wiped his face on his sleeve, embarrassed but also somehow lighter, as if the tears had washed away something heavy he had been carrying. I am sorry, he managed. Nothing to be sorry for, Martha said firmly. Now, let us eat before this chicken gets cold. Sam helped Carl with his plate. Without comment, Sam began cutting Carl's chicken into small pieces. Emma buttered a biscuit and placed it within reach. Martha spooned mashed potatoes and green beans, making sure each bite was manageable. They were feeding him. These people whose son and brother died fighting Germany were cutting his food and helping him like a child. The absurdity and beauty of it threatened to overwhelm Carl again. The food itself was a revelation. The fried chicken was perfectly crispy outside, juicy inside, seasoned with something Carl could not identify, but which tasted like heaven itself. Paprika, Martha explained, watching his reaction, and a touch of cayenne. Secret is in the buttermilk soak. The mashed potatoes were impossibly creamy. Heavy cream and butter, Martha said with a smile. Everything is better with butter. And the biscuits. The biscuits were light as air, flaky, buttery, slightly sweet. Carl closed his eyes when he tasted the first one, and for a moment he was not a prisoner in a foreign land. He was just a human being experiencing something good. It's like heaven, he breathed. Martha beamed. Well, bless your heart. That is the nicest thing anyone has said about my cooking in years. As the meal progressed, the conversation flowed more easily. Martha asked about Carl's family. He told them about his mother Helga, who taught piano in the village, about his sister Greta, who dreamed of being a nurse before the war made everything uncertain, about his father who died in 1941, his heart giving out under the stress of watching his country embrace madness. He tried to speak against it, Carl said quietly. The hatred, the laws against Jews. He preached love and forgiveness the way Jesus taught. They forced him to retire, said he was not loyal enough to the Reich. Jack nodded slowly. Sounds like a good man, a brave man. Yes, he was brave, braver than me. I just went along. I thought I had no choice, but he showed me there is always a choice, even when the choice is hard. The conversation turned lighter. Emma asked what Carl studied at university. Mathematics, specifically calculus and geometry. Jack expressed surprise. You are a scholar. What in the world were you doing as a foot soldier? War does not ask what you want to be. War tells you what you must be. Sam, who had been mostly quiet throughout the meal, finally spoke. What would you do if the war ended tomorrow? What would you do? Carl thought carefully. I would go home, find my mother and sister, make sure they are safe. Then I would teach mathematics to children, help them see the beauty in numbers and patterns, help them build things instead of destroying them. Bobby wanted to teach too, Emma said softly. History. He would have been a good teacher, Carl said, looking at the photograph visible from the dining room. He has kind face, I can see it in the picture. The compliment seemed to break something in Emma. She cried again, but these were different tears. Not bitter, somehow releasing. After the meal, they moved to the porch for coffee and peach cobbler. The dessert was transcendent. Sweet peaches, buttery crust, a hint of cinnamon and nutmeg. Carl ate slowly, savoring each bite. When was the last time he had tasted something so purely good, so untouched by war and fear and rationing the poor? As the sun began its descent, painting the Texas sky in layers of orange and purple and deep blue, Martha excused herself to wash dishes. Emma went to help. Jack settled into his rocking chair and within minutes was dozing, his head tilted back, his breathing deep and even. That left Sam and Carl alone on the porch, watching the day fade into evening. Sam pulled out 2 Lucky Strike cigarettes, lit them both, and handed one to Carl. With his bandaged hands, Carl could not hold it properly, so Sam placed it carefully between his lips. They smoked in silence for a while. 2 23-year-old men who should have been enemies sitting like old friends in the gathering dusk. "Can I ask you something?" Sam said finally. "Yes." "What was it like being German during all of it?" Carl took a long drag, considering. "You mean, what was it like to be lied to be taught that we were superior, that everyone else was less than human, to watch our neighbors disappear because they were different?" "Yeah, that. It was like drowning, very slowly. Each day the water gets a little higher. At first you think it is not so bad. You can still breathe. But then one day you realize the water is at your chin, and you cannot remember when it got so high. But you knew it was wrong. Some of us knew. My father knew. Some teachers, some pastors, some ordinary people. They knew. But knowing and speaking are different things. Speaking could cost everything. Your family, your life." Carl paused. "I am not making excuses. I was a coward. I should have spoken. Instead, I put on the uniform and went to war." Sam was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I hated you when you first came to the ranch." "I know. I hated all of you, for Bobby. I would lie awake at night imagining." He stopped. "Imagining revenge." Carl finished softly. "I understand. I would feel the same. But today, watching you save liberty, watching you cry during grace, watching you with Mama and Emma being so gentle and respectful." Sam's voice was thick now. "You are not my enemy. Hitler is my enemy. The war is my enemy. But you are just a kid caught in something bigger than both of us." "Yes," Carl agreed softly. "We are both caught, both scared, both wanting to go home. Do you ever think about staying after the war? Staying in America?" The question surprised Carl. "Sometimes I dream about it. But my mother, my sister, they need me. I must go back, must help rebuild, even if it is hard." Sam nodded, understanding. That is the difference between a boy and a man. A boy runs from hard things. A man runs toward them. They finished their cigarettes as the first stars appeared, bright pinpricks in the darkening sky. The same stars that shone over Germany, over the battlefields of Europe, over this Texas ranch, where enemies were learning to see each other as brothers. From inside, Martha called, "Boys, come get some cobbler to take back to camp." When Carl stood to leave, Sam stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Tomorrow and the days after, when you come to work, it is going to be different." "Different how?" "I'm going to teach you, not just ranch work, everything. How to ride properly, how to rope, how to read the land and the sky, how to gentle a horse, all of it." "Why?" Sam looked away, looked back, met Carl's eyes directly. "Because that is what Bobby would have done. If some German kid needed help, Bobby would have taught him. That is who he was. And if I cannot bring him back," his voice broke, "if I cannot bring him back, at least I can honor who he was, by being the kind of man he would have been proud to call brother." Carl could not speak. He simply knotted his throat too tight for words. As the truck carried him back to Camp Hearn through the warm Texas night, Carl looked out at the landscape rolling past. Endless grassland under an enormous sky, a place so different from Bavaria, so foreign, and yet somehow it felt more like home than anywhere he had been in years. For the first time since his capture, he felt something unexpected. Hope, narrator. The summer of 1944 passed into autumn and autumn into winter. Every day, Carl Hoffman worked at the Tucker Ranch. And every day, true to his word, Sam Tucker taught him, not just ranch work, everything. How to read the sky for coming weather. See those mare's tail clouds, rain in 24 hours. How to gentle a nervous horse with patience and soft words instead of force. How to mend leather tack so the stitching would hold for years. How to read the land itself, which grass meant good grazing, which meant drought, which meant the soil was tired and needed rest. But Sam taught him other things too, things that could not be measured in practical skills. He taught him American songs. They would sit on the corral fence during lunch break, and Sam would strum his guitar, teaching Carl the words to You Are My Sunshine and Red River Valley. Carl in turn taught Sam German folk songs, old songs from before the Nazis, songs about forests and rivers and longing for home, songs that had nothing to do with war. The other ranch hands and prisoners would gather to listen. Sometimes they all sang together German words and English words, mixing in the warm Texas air, creating something new. Something that had no flag, no uniform, no hatred, just human voices harmonizing. Sam taught him about baseball, took him to watch a game between Camp Hearn prisoners and American guards. Carl was terrible at first, could not understand why anyone would hit a ball just to run in a circle. But when he finally connected bat with ball and heard that perfect crack, saw the ball sailing into the outfield, felt his feet carrying him around the bases, while both Americans and Germans cheered, he understood. It was not about the game. It was about the joy of doing something together. And on Sundays, Martha Tucker insisted Carl come to church. First Baptist Church of Hearn, Texas. A small white building with a tall steeple and wooden pews worn smooth by decades of Sunday congregations. The first time Carl entered wearing borrowed civilian clothes, the room fell silent. Some faces were hostile, others merely curious. A few, very few, were welcoming. But Reverend James Wilson, a silver-haired man of 62, who had buried too many boys these past 3 years, looked at Carl and smiled. Welcome, son. There is always room at God's table. The sermons over those months changed Carl in ways he could not fully articulate. Reverend Wilson preached about forgiveness, about love, about choosing grace over vengeance. And every word felt like it was aimed directly at Carl's heart, peeling away the layers of propaganda and hate he had been taught, revealing something cleaner underneath. Something true. May 8th, 1945. Victory in Europe Day arrived like a thunderclap. The announcement came over the radio at 9 in the morning. Germany has surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe is over. At Camp Hearn, the reaction among prisoners was complicated. Some wept with relief. They had survived. They would go home. Others sat in stunned silence, unable to process that their fatherland had been utterly, completely defeated. A few die-hard Nazis raged, refusing to believe it, insisting it was American propaganda. Carl sat on his bunk head in his hands, feeling hollow. Germany had lost. His country, the place where he had been born, where his mother and sister waited, was now occupied by foreign armies. What would be left when he returned? What kind of Germany would he find? At the Tucker Ranch, Martha cried, not from joy, though the war was over, but from a grief that had no expiration date. Victory could not bring Bobby back. Peace could not undo his death. Sam found Carl late that afternoon, sitting alone by the fence where Liberty grazed. The horse, sensing his distress, had wandered over and was resting her head against his shoulder in that way horses have of offering comfort without words. Sam sat down beside him, said nothing for a long time. The silence between them was comfortable now, familiar, the silence of brothers who did not always need words. Finally, Sam spoke. You okay? I do not know what I am. Carl's English had improved dramatically over the months. He barely had to search for words anymore. My country is defeated. My home is occupied. I do not know what is left. You will go back soon. Help rebuild. Yes, I will go back. But Sam, Carl's voice cracked, I do not want to go. Sam turned to look at him, surprised. What do you mean? Carl gestured around them. At the ranch, the endless sky, the horse nuzzling his shoulder, the land stretching to the horizon. Here I am free. Here I have learned what it means to be human again. Not soldier, not prisoner, just man. When I go back to Germany, I will be defeated soldier, enemy, maybe arrested by Russians if they control Bavaria, and worse than any of that. He had to stop collect himself. I will lose this. I will lose you. My friend, my brother. Sam's jaw worked. Carl, listen to me. I know I cannot stay. My mother needs me. My sister needs me. But I am afraid. Afraid that when I leave Texas, I will lose the best part of myself. The part you helped me find. They sat in silence as the sun painted the western sky orange and gold, and the first evening star appeared. You will not lose it, Sam said finally, his voice rough with emotion. What you learned here, what you became here, that is yours now. Nobody can take that away. Not the Russians, not the Americans, not anybody. You promise? I promise, Yentos. Sam pulled something from his pocket, a small leather notebook worn at the edges. Here, take this. Carl opened it. The pages were blank. What is this for? Write in it every day. Write about what you learned here, about the ranch, about liberty, about us, about what we became, so you never forget. I could never forget. Write it anyway. And when you get home, when things are hard, read it. Remember that you are not just German. You are not just American either. You are both. You are something new. And that is what is going to rebuild the world. People like you who have seen both sides and chosen something better than hate. Carl looked at his friend, this cowboy with a limp and a stubborn heart, this man who had lost his brother but chose to save an enemy instead of destroying him, and felt tears burning in his eyes. I will write every day, I promise. August 15th, 1945. The repatriation orders came in late August. German prisoners would begin returning home in September. Carl had maybe 3 weeks left in Texas. 3 weeks to say goodbye to the only place he had ever felt truly free. On August 15th, the day Japan surrendered and the war finally completely ended, the Tucker family held a celebration dinner. The whole town of Hearn was jubilant. Church bells rang. People danced in the streets. The nightmare was over. But at the Tucker Ranch, the celebration was bittersweet. Everyone knew what peace meant. Carl would leave. After dinner, as the family sat on the porch watching fireflies blink in the gathering dusk, Sam stood up. Carl, come with me to the barn. In the barn, lit by a single lantern, Liberty stood in her stall with her 6-month-old colt. The young horse was all legs and curiosity with Liberty's strong build and gentle eyes. This is Liberty's colt, Sam said. His name is Freedom. Carl smiled at the name. He is beautiful. He will be great horse like his mother. He is yours. The smile faded. What, Sam? I cannot take a haste back to Germany. I know, no horses on troop ships, but he is yours in spirit. Sam stroked the colt's neck. When you leave here, when you go back to Germany and start over, I want you to remember Freedom. Remember what he represents. Remember that you can be free even when everything is trying to cage you. Carl's vision blurred with tears. Sam, I have no words. This is too much. You do not need words, brother. They stood together in the lantern light, and Carl realized this was goodbye. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Too soon. The thought was unbearable. There is something else. Sam pulled an envelope from his jacket. Do not open it until you are on the ship. Sam, please, you do not have to give me anything else. Just promise me. Wait until you are at sea. I promise. They embraced then, two young men who had been enemies and became brothers, holding on like they could stop time itself if they just held tight enough. September 12, 1945. The morning Carl left Texas, the sky was gray with unusual clouds, and a strange cold had settled over the land. Hearn train station at dawn. German prisoners lined up beside the train carrying their small bundles of possessions. Most were silent, processing the mixture of relief and anxiety. They were going home. But what home? What Germany waited for them? The Tucker family arrived just as loading began. Martha carried a package wrapped in brown paper. Emma's eyes were swollen from crying. Jack stood tall, jaw set against emotion. And Sam looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. We came to see you off, Martha said, her voice breaking. Could not let you leave without saying proper goodbye. She handed Carl the package. Inside, he found biscuits wrapped in a checkered cloth, and beneath them a piece of paper covered in Martha's neat handwriting. "It is the recipe," she said, "for my biscuits. So when you are home, when you are feeling lost, you can make them. And remember." Carl clutched the package, unable to speak. Emma hugged him fiercely. "Write to us, please. Let us know you are safe." "I will, I promise." Jack shook his hand, then pulled him into a rough embrace. "You are a good man, Carl Hoffman. Bobby would have liked you. Hell, Bobby would have loved you." That is the highest praise I will ever receive," Carl whispered. Then Sam. They stood facing each other while the train whistle blew its warning. 2 minutes until departure. Sam handed Carl a photograph. It showed the two of them standing by Liberty's stall, arms around each other's shoulders, both grinning. Carl did not remember when it was taken, but there it was. Proof that this had been real. "So you do not forget," Sam said. "I could never forget any of this, any of you." "I know, but just in case," they embraced one final time. "Thank you," Carl said, his face pressed against Sam's shoulder. "Thank you for saving me, for showing me what America really means, for teaching me that hate is a choice and so is love." "Thank you for saving Liberty," Sam replied, his voice thick. "For reminding me that Bobby would not want me to hate. For being brave enough to let me teach you. For becoming my brother." The conductor's final whistle. Carl had to go. He climbed aboard, found a window seat, pressed his face to the glass. The Tuckers stood on the platform waving. Martha crying openly now, Jack's arm around her, Emma with her handkerchief to her eyes, and Sam standing straight, hand raised in farewell. As the train pulled away, Carl watched Texas recede, the land that had given him back his humanity, the family that had taught him what forgiveness looked like, the friend who had shown him that yesterday's enemy could become today's brother. The letter 3 days later on a troop ship in the mid-Atlantic. Carl finally opened Sam's envelope. Inside was $200 in cash, a fortune, equivalent to half a year's wages, and a letter in Sam's blocky handwriting. "Carl, this is for your family, to help you start over. You earned every penny working the ranch, so it is not charity. It is wages owed. Use it well. Remember Texas. Remember Liberty. Remember that you are not just what the war made you. You are what you choose to become. Hate is a choice. Fear is a choice. But so is love. So is courage. So is forgiveness. Choose love, brother. Every single day, choose love. I do not know if we will see each other again in this life. The ocean is wide and the world is broken, and putting it back together is going to take a long time. But I believe we will meet again somehow. Maybe in this world, maybe in the next. Either way, you are my brother forever. Nothing changes that. Your friend, Sam Tucker." There was an address on the back. Tucker Ranch, Route 7, Hearn, Texas. "Write to me. I want to know everything. How you are rebuilding, how your mother and sister are, what the new Germany looks like. I want to watch you live the life you deserve, the life you earned." Carl read the letter 3 times, memorizing every word. Then he sat on the deck as the ship cut through the gray Atlantic, and he cried. Not from sadness exactly, but from the overwhelming weight of grace he had been given. And he began to write, "Dear Sam, I am 3 days at sea. Yesterday I opened your gift. I cried like a child, not because of the money, though it will save my family, but because of what the money represents. That you see me as a man worthy of wages, as an equal, as a brother. Thank you is not enough, will never be enough. But thank you. I will write every 2 weeks. I will tell you everything. And someday, if God wills it, I will return to Texas. This I promise you, your brother forever, Carl." Years between. For 39 years, Sam and Carl kept that promise. They wrote letters, twice a month like clockwork. Through those letters, they watched each other live. Carl wrote about Bavaria and ruins, about using Sam's money to buy seed and 2 dairy cows, about meeting Anna, a widow who had lost her husband at Stalingrad, about their wedding in a bombed church that still somehow stood, about the birth of their son, Carl Samuel Hoffman, named after both of them. Sam wrote about marrying Ruth, a piano teacher he met at church, about the birth of his son, Robert Samuel Bobby, for his brother Samuel for himself, about teaching the boy to ride on Freedom's colt, about taking over the ranch when Jack died in 1970, about the joy and pain of watching his son grow into a man who looked heartbreakingly like Bobby. The letters chronicled ordinary miracles. Carl buying land, starting his own small ranch in Bavaria using American methods. Sam winning a breeding award for his quarter horses. Carl teaching local children about mathematics and ranching. Sam becoming a deacon at First Baptist. Both men growing older, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing down, but their friendship only deepening with time. Carl wrote in 1978, "I am 57 now. Young Carl Samuel has children of his own. Your namesake is a grandfather, but I think of you every day. I have saved money for 30 years. Someday I will come back to Texas to see you again before we are too old. This is the dream of my life," Sam wrote back. "You better come soon, brother. We are not getting any younger. Ruth wants to meet you before time runs out for any of us." In 1980, Sam wrote with devastating news. "Ruth is sick, cancer. Doctors say maybe a year. She made me promise something. To bring you here if I can, one last time. She says I talk about you so much you are already family. She wants to meet the man who changed her husband's life." Carl sent flowers and prayers. He wanted desperately to come, but Anna was also sick. Diabetes. The trip would have to wait. In 1982, Sam wrote, "Ruth passed last month. Peaceful at home, surrounded by family. At the end, she said, make sure Carl comes. Even if it is for my funeral, he is family. I am putting affairs in order. When you are ready to visit, I am ready to see you, brother." And in 1983, Carl finally wrote, "Anna says go. Visit Sam before time runs out for one of us. I am making arrangements. Expect a letter with dates soon. After 40 years, I'm coming home to Texas." April 15th, 1984, Austin International Airport. Carl Hoffman, 63 years old, stepped off the plane from Frankfurt. He wore American clothes now. Jeans boots, a Western shirt. His hair was white, his face lined, but his eyes were the same. Still kind, still searching, his heart hammered against his ribs. 40 years. Would Sam even recognize him? Would he recognize Sam? He walked through customs into the arrivals terminal, scanning the crowd, looking for, there, standing beside a pillar holding a hand-lettered sign. "Welcome home, brother." Sam Tucker, also 63, also white-haired, wearing jeans boots and the same style cowboy hat he had worn in 1944. His face was weathered by 4 decades of Texas sun, but his eyes were exactly the same. Those gray-green eyes that had looked at Carl with such coldness once and then with such warmth. They saw each other across the terminal. Time stopped. For a moment, neither moved. Just stared, seeing the young men they had been superimposed over the older men they had become. 23 and 63 existing simultaneously. Then Carl dropped his suitcase. Sam dropped his sign. They walked toward each other, then jogged. Then ran as much as 2 63-year-old men could run, their bodies protesting but obeying because the heart demanded it. They collided in the middle of the terminal and held each other, both crying openly, not caring who saw, not caring about anything except this moment they had waited 40 years to experience. "Sam Tucker," Carl said, his voice breaking. "My brother." "Carl Hoffman," Sam replied, equally broken. "Took you long enough to come home." Carl laughed through his tears. "Yes, took too long, but I am here now, finally here." They pulled back to look at each other, hands on each other's shoulders, drinking in the sight. "You look old," Sam said. "You look terrible," Carl shot back. They both burst into laughter, the easy laughter of brothers who knew each other's souls. Around them, people had stopped to watch. Some were crying too, though they did not know why. There was just something about these two old men holding each other like shipwreck survivors finally reaching shore that touched something universal and true. Back at the ranch, the drive from Austin to the ranch took an hour. Carl pressed his face to the window like a child drinking in the landscape he had dreamed about for 40 years. "Everything is the same," he kept saying. "The route, the fence is the land. Sam is that, the barn. Same barn, fixed it up over the years, but same bones, same soul." When they pulled up to the house, Carl saw figures on the porch. Emma Tucker, now 59, gray-haired, but still with those kind eyes, waiting with her grown children. And in a rocking chair wrapped in a quilt despite the warm spring air, Martha Tucker, 92 years old, frail but alert. Still here, still alive. Carl climbed out of the truck on shaking legs. He walked slowly up to the porch, climbed the steps, and knelt beside Martha's rocking chair like a suppliant before an altar. Mrs. Tucker, he said softly, I came back. Martha's hand paper-thin skin over bird bones reached out to touch his face. Her fingers traced his features like a blind woman reading Braille. Carl, my little Carl. Not so little anymore, ma'am. Oh, my boy, my German boy. You came home. She pulled him into her arms with surprising strength. I prayed every night for 40 years, and God is so good. So good. Emma hugged him next, crying, You look just like your pictures. Older but the same eyes, the same kind eyes. Carl gave out the gifts he had brought. To Sam, his German Iron Cross from North Africa. Not about the war, about two soldiers who became brothers. You earned this for saving me from hate. To Martha, handmade lace from Bavaria. From my Anna. She says thank you for saving her husband's soul. To everyone, photographs of his family. Young Carl Samuel, now 29. Carl Samuel's children. 3 generations, all bearing the mark of that summer in 1944. After the greeting, Sam said quietly, There is something I want to show you. He led Carl to the small cemetery on the ranch property. 3 headstones. Jack Tucker, 1900 to 1970. Liberty, 1936 to 1958. Freedom, 1945 to 1962. Carl knelt at all 3 graves, placing wild flowers he had picked along the roadside. At Liberty's grave, he whispered, Thank you, girl. Thank you for running toward that ravine, for giving me the chance to show I was still human. Sam handed him something, a brass nameplate. Freedom. Gift from a friend. I saved it for you. Carl clutched it to his chest and wept. The campfire. That evening, they built a fire in the same spot where Carl had sat 40 years earlier. Sam Carl Bobby Tucker, Jr., who was 31 now, and young Carl Samuel, who had flown from Germany to join his father. 4 men, 2 generations, 2 countries, 1 story. Someone produced a guitar. Sam strummed a few chords. Carl's face lit up. You still remember the songs? Sam asked. Every note. They sang Home on the Range, their voices, one with Texas drawl, one with German accent, blending perfectly. Young Carl Samuel and Bobby Jr. joined in learning the song their fathers had sung when the world was at war. Mr. Hoffman, Bobby Jr. said after the song ended, I want to thank you. Thank me for what? For my father. He does not talk much about Uncle Bobby, about the war. It hurts too much, but when he talks about you, he lights up. You gave him a way to deal with the grief. By teaching you, by showing you kindness instead of hate, he honored Uncle Bobby's memory. You helped him heal. Carl turned to Sam, question in his eyes. Sam nodded slowly. It is true. You saved me, Carl, same way I saved you. We saved each other. Then Texas did not just change my life, it changed yours too. That is what forgiveness does, brother. It frees both people. Later, when the younger men had gone to bed, Sam and Carl sat alone under the Texas stars, the same stars that had watched over them in 1944. Sam, Carl said quietly, I almost did not come. Why, Hoya? Fear that it would not be the same, that we had built it bigger in our memories than it really was. And now I know, it was not bigger in memory, it was exactly as I remembered. You, your family, Texas, the values all real, all true. Carl looked at his friend. This is why I love America. Not government, not politics, the people. You. This is real America. Choosing love over hate, choosing to see the human in the enemy, choosing to forgive even when it costs everything. Sam was quiet for a long moment. You know what Bobby would say if he could see this now? What? He would say, that is my brother Sam, always bringing home strays. Sam smiled, but he would be proud, because we proved something important, that hate does not have to win, that love can win, even between enemies. Especially between enemies. They sat in comfortable silence until the fire burned low and the stars wheeled overhead, eternal and indifferent and somehow comforting in their constancy. 1 year later, May 8th, 1985, 40 years to the day since Germany surrendered. But this May 8th was different. This was the day they buried Samuel Tucker. Heart attack. February 14th, Valentine's Day. He had been feeding horses when he fell. The doctor said it was quick, painless. Sam had lived a good life. 64 years full of love and work and purpose. But still it hurt like the world was ending. Carl stood at the graveside in Veterans Memorial Cemetery, Austin surrounded by Sam's family friends, half the town of Hearn. Dozens of veterans who had served with Am or heard about him about what he had done during the war about the German prisoner who became his brother. In Carl's hands, the Iron Cross he had given Sam a year earlier. Sam had kept it on his mantle in a place of honor beside Bobby's photograph. Now Carl placed it on the casket beside the American flag. "For my brother," he said simply. After the funeral, Reverend Wilson, now 93 bent but still sharp, asked Carl if he would say a few words. Carl stood before the assembled crowd, this German man in his 60s, and spoke from a heart that was breaking but also somehow impossibly full. "My name is Carl Hoffman. I am German. In 1944, I was prisoner of war in Texas. Sam Tucker was my guard." He paused, gathering himself. "Sam had every reason to hate me. His brother died fighting my country, but Sam taught me something I never learned in Germany, something that changed my life, that hate is the easy choice. Love, forgiveness, kindness, these require courage." His voice strengthened. "Sam Tucker was the most courageous man I ever knew. He gave me America, not just the place, but the idea that all men are created equal, that we can choose who we become, that yesterday's enemy can be today's brother." Around him, grown men were crying. "For 40 years, Sam was my brother, my teacher, my friend. I owe him my life, my family, my heart. And I promise him now." Carl's voice broke, but he pushed through. "I promise I will tell our story, so others know it is possible, that forgiveness works, that love wins." He knelt at the grave, placed his hand on the casket. "Thank you, brother, for saving me, for teaching me, for showing me what America truly means. I will see you again in a better place, where there is no war, no uniforms, no borders, just brothers." After the ceremony, Bobby Tucker Jr. approached Carl with an envelope. "Dad wanted you to have this. He wrote it before he died." Carl's hands trembled as he opened it. "Carl, if you are reading this, I am gone. Do not be sad. I lived a good life, had a good wife, a good son, good land. But most of all, I had a good brother. You, remember that summer when you saved liberty? That was the moment God showed me what Christianity really means. Not just going to church, actually loving your enemy, actually forgiving, actually seeing the human in the uniform. You taught me as much as I taught you, brother. You taught me that grace is real, that people can change, that the German kid in that barracks was not my enemy. He was my brother waiting to be found. I am proud of you, Carl, proud of the man you became, the family you built, the ranch you run. You took what Texas gave you and made it beautiful. Keep telling our story. Please, young people need to hear that hate does not have to win, that enemies can become brothers, that bacon and kindness in a stubborn cowboy with a limp can change the world. I will see you on the other side, brother. Save me a seat. Your friend forever. Sam Tucker." Carl folded the letter carefully, pressed it to his heart. He looked at the grave one last time. "I will tell the story, Sam. The whole world will know about the cowboy and the prisoner, about two young men who chose love over hate. This I promise." Epilogue. Carl Hoffman kept that promise. For 27 more years, he told the story. At schools, churches, veteran groups. In Germany and America both. He lived to 91, died in 2012, surrounded by children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. All of them knowing the story of Sam Tucker, of Texas, of the summer that changed everything. His son, Carl Samuel, still runs the family ranch in Bavaria, using American methods his father learned 40 years ago. Sam's grandson runs the Tucker Ranch in Texas. Every summer, the families meet, sometimes in Texas, sometimes in Bavaria. They ride horses together, share meals, tell the story, because that is what real victory looks like. Not conquering an enemy, but converting him. Not destroying him, but redeeming him. Not hating him, but loving him. In 1944, America sent soldiers to Europe to fight Germans. But in a small corner of Texas, one cowboy showed one German prisoner what America really means. And in doing so, he won a more important victory than any battle could achieve. He won a heart. He won a brother. The sun sets over the Tucker Ranch. Two empty rocking chairs on the porch. a guitar leaning against the wall, wind chimes made from old horseshoes tinkling in the breeze. The camera pulls back to show both the Tucker Ranch sign and a small marker beside it. Hoffman family, friends since 1944. The evening star appears. The mockingbird begins its song. And somewhere in a place beyond time and borders and old hatreds, two brothers are sitting together watching the stars come out, finally and forever home.